He's probably, at least in my opinion, I'm curious for yours, he's like the first indie darling, indie superstar where, the hardcore collectors, they were doing the tape trading and it could have just been him and Al Snow over and over. But those two guys were like, you got to see this match.
Yeah.
And the visual of him, even if he didn't use it in the match, but throwing his body through a table afterwards just to show people he could.
Yeah.
And going through it over and over and over until it finally broke. Not quote-unquote gimmicked tables, but almost a botchamania style. This table is not going anywhere. And he would just keep after it.
Keep at it, yeah.
That felt like something that when you saw it or heard about it, you would have been like, okay, this is interesting. This is cool.
Because at that time, it was difficult to get tapes.
Yes.
So
you had to know somebody.
Yeah, his legend kind of preceded him because he was a guy, he had a really good physique at the time and for the time, but he didn't look like a bodybuilder.
Right.
And he could do incredible moves that required great body control and athleticism, but he did not look like a gymnast doing them.
Right.
So there was a sense that it looked out of control. And sometimes it was.
Yeah.
So, and I also, going back to reading The Observer, talking about, like, there were kids who were terrified of him when he came out, on the gurney first a handful of times. He didn't speak. He didn't ever want to betray the gimmick, but being the nephew of the original Sheik. And so he was really laser focused on just creating mayhem and making the best matches possible.
I guess we should add some context. Some of our younger listeners probably don't know that the Sheik was famous for bleeding, for throwing fireballs, or presenting fireballs, I guess. But also, too, he would just run through the crowd with a sword. Mm-hmm. And as a little kid, when a crazy man runs at you with a sword and then every now and again throws fire, that's pretty scary.
Yeah.
And now here's his relative who's being wheeled out almost in a Hannibal Lecter style mask. Mm-hmm. He's strapped down to the gurney, almost like those U-Haul dollies, and he's just strapped to the thing.
Yeah.
And then they let him loose. It's a spectacle, and it feels perfect for the Cactus Jack character, does it not?
It does. It was like a dream match. It came to fruition because Kevin Sullivan had come from ECW, was back in the WCW fold. He was trying to create a working relationship with them, so there was like a talent exchange. And Kevin approached me about, I don't know if he approached me asking if I would do it. I don't know if it was the type of thing I had to do. Certainly the type of thing I would look forward to doing. But it was thought to be a dream match given our styles.
But you had never met him at that point, him being Sabu.
Maybe I'd met him on a couple indies when he was not Sabu yet. We're talking 80, 88 maybe.
I see. You're actively working for WCW, but you know you're leaving.
Right.
ECW is now engaged in a working relationship because Todd Gordon is friendly with Kevin Sullivan, who's helping book WCW now. So they're going to put you on this card, but it's kind of against your wishes because this could be some money for me post WCW, and I'm just giving it away now.
Yeah.
What do you remember about, how all that came together and the circumstances behind putting together the match? Just walk me through all that.
Yeah. So I just said a few minutes ago it was something I would have been extremely enthusiastic about, and then I read from my own book, and it brought back the memory. That's right. Was counting on that to be a marquee matchup that I could take around the Indies, and it did turn out to be that. It's funny that the match that had all the attention on it was still good. I think it still holds up, but it was not nearly as good as some of the other ones we'd have on the independent circuit. And there's one specifically in Las Vegas, I believe at the Brass Nugget. Not the Golden, not the
A Brass Nugget.
Yeah, it may have been the Brass Nugget. We had a Titanic match that included me pile driving Sabu on the blackjack table, but not before doing the clean sweep, which I believe is a justifiable homicide in Nevada. Now, don't quote me on that, but I believe security could take extreme measures on someone who does a clean sweep on the blackjack table.
It's illegal as hell. Yeah.
And then uses it to pile drive his opponent on. And I had this concept for the match. I don't know if I just recently rewatched Of Mice and Men or whether I was calling on, my memories of Mice and Men. But I was always so taken with the fight that Curly and Lenny have, where Lenny has no offense. Curly's a former boxer. He's picking on a guy with a mental handicap, and the only offense that Lenny gets is when he grabs Curly's hand and crushes it. Now, I'm not saying I was going to do something like that to Sabu, but there was about I don't think I had any offense for the first 5 minutes of the match. And that was by design. And I think finally when I caught him with a back elbow, it got the response I was hoping for. But, sometimes a concept match like that may not have been the way to go the first time out of the gate, where they want to see kind of raw, unbridled action.
Right.
And even in talking to Paul E. in the follow-up, where some people were seen as a disappointment, he's like, Cactus, you have to understand that there were people who literally thought they were going to see a human being die. So you're setting the bar pretty high when you think there's going to be a life taken, and that doesn't happen.
So, even though ECW is not really a big player at this point, it's kind of a cool story to see one of the WCW champions come over and actively wrestle here.
Yeah.
But I am curious, how different do you think the presentation would have been if you weren't a part of WCW at the time? Yeah. Were there certain things that you would have liked to have done that you knew they won't go for that? Or could you really do whatever? And if there was a restrictor plate, it was self-imposed because you wanted to save that for when you were on your own?
I think we want to have the best match that we could.
Sure.
Again, maybe it would have been better if I hadn't, started out the first 5 minutes the way we did. But I thought it turned into a really good match. And I hurt my back that night to the point where afterwards, after standing, you would wait for hours to do your promo afterwards. Yeah. There may have been a shower. I don't think it appeared to be, it looked like a detriment to walk into that shower. I think almost every one of us would rather be in their stuff than showering with those facilities. And I remember thinking, I don't have to be here. I could go back to my room because I was really hurting. It was only the second. Had one prescription for pain medication in my life. That was after the Cactus Max Pain against the Nasties, where I took the weird bump off the table or off the ramp after the table broke on the pile driver. So we called an audible on the finish, and it resulted in a pretty bad bone bruise. And that was the first time I'd ever taken a pain pill. And I believe I had whatever the number they give you, 30 or whatever it was. And so one of the boys, knowing I was in pain, had given me something for it. So it was pretty bad for me to go down that route where I had one pain pill, because I had no tolerance, would really space me out. But I remember thinking, this is important to WCW.
Yes.
It had been told to me that it was important to get this match, the company, and the person over. So that was my mindset, is that I'm not going to go back to a warm hotel room and take a shower. I'm in a lot of pain, in less pain now, and but I don't think I got the pain medicine until I went to Denny's afterwards. So I still would have been in a lot of pain. Later on, around 3 or 4 a.m., I broke out in hives over most of my body. I still don't have an explanation for that.
You think it was the pain pill?
I don't know if it was the sweat, sitting around, because, Cactus was, largely dressed. I don't know what it was. I don't know, but I do know that I tried to get up, and I could barely walk within hours of that match. But the pain was already, really setting in. And instead of going back to my room and showering, I stuck around those extra 3 hours just so I could do what I had been told was important, to get the company, the match, and the guy over to the best of my abilities. And so I did that post-match with an interview that rankled some in the WCW community. So I'm taking feelings that are real, which is this guy's more extreme than I am.
Right.
And that hurts. So I'm going to let the audience know that their audience know they've got the most extreme guy. Maybe there was a feeling that I'd come back to try to reclaim that title. But everything that led up to the actual spitting on the belt, I thought was really heartfelt and was a nod to how much the tag title did mean to me before I spit on it. I clearly made it a point to talk about how important it was. I don't know if I used the word love when I talk about it, but I said, but it's not anymore. That something, the title meant even more to me was that of wildest wrestler. I think that's Jack Kevorkian's favorite wrestler he was the guy that did the assisted suicide and was a big name in the news at that time. And that Sabu held those titles. And that's why this tag team title no longer meant as much. But that was my whole case when I was reprimanded, was asking if they'd actually seen it. It was reported to Rick that I'd spit on the WWE title, or the WCW title, and how much titles mean so much to Rick, like as the consummate champion. And I guess, did you see the video? Did you see it? And to this day, I don't think the people who reprimanded me ever saw it. And I think if they did see it, they go, that's a good promo.